Welcome to the Data Hall YouTube channel. In our previous video, we learned how to calculate stock returns in Stata. Now that was a manual sort of method of calculating stock returns. But in this video, we are going to see a more quicker, a more easier way of calculating stock returns. So the command that we are going to use is a user written command. It is called ASCOL. So whenever you are using a user written command, you would first have to install it in your Stata system. So let's first install this command. To install this command, we know we use ssc install and then write the command name, which in this case is ASCOL. Although I already have installed this command, but in your case you should be connected to the internet for it to be installed. Okay, so let's move back to towards the code. First we need to set the data in we need to tell Stata whether our data is a time series or a panel data. I am using the same data that I used in my previous video, which is the panel data. We have closing prices for different firms. The data that we have is a daily closing prices. So I know I have panel data. I would actually set my cross-section variable is symbol code and my time variable is date. Next, we are going to use this command. We write the command name, then the variable which stores the prices. So in this case, you can see that the closing prices are stored in the variable called closing. So I write the name of the variable, then comma, then we input a few options. Now it depends on what we currently have, what data we have, and where we want to go. So first thing, if we have the closing prices data or opening prices data or whatever, the data we have is prices rather than returns, then we would use the prices option. So in my case, I've told you that the data we are using is closing prices. So I have written the prices option. Then I need to convert these prices into weekly prices, right? So because I need weekly stock returns, so I would use ASCOL, the variable name, comma, to-week option, and then the prices. Let me execute this command. Okay, now you would see that coming towards the data viewer, it has just retained the last value of each week, right? And if you have seen my previous video, I have given the link in the description. You would see that we did all these steps using 4 different codes, right? But in this case, we did it using just one line of code. Now remember, this code didn't give us the stock returns, rather it just gave us the closing prices of a week or weekly closing prices. You can see that these are not returns, these are weekly closing prices for each week. If we wanted to convert them into returns, then we would use the same command we used in our previous video, which is by sort symbol code date. So we want to generate stock returns for each firm, right? This is what by sort would do, but we first want to sort the stock based on the date variable. So generate stock return for each stock separately, sorted by date. Let's execute this. And now we have the stock returns that we wanted. These are the stock returns for the first firm. We would have a first missing values because we needed previous value, but we do not have it in our data. And the same is the case for the second cross section, the second firm. You would see there is a missing value. So now we have weekly stock returns. Now in case instead of having closing prices, you had returns, the data you had were already daily, stock returns. You didn't had prices data, but you had the returns data. Then instead of using the prices option, you would use the return option, right? But for that, you need to understand that there are two ways in finance we calculate returns using two different methods. One is the simple return method, where we use the formula return is equal to current price minus previous price, the price of the previous day, divided by the previous price. This is the formula to calculate simple return. And then we have log return, and the log return is equal to return would be equal to natural log of current value divided by previous value. So that depends. The return data that you have is whether calculated as simple returns or log return. So now, if we wanted to calculate returns, if we had returns data and we wanted to use this ASCOL command to calculate weekly returns, then we would use it like this: returns, and we would use log. Let's say if we had log returns. If we didn't had log returns, we would use the term simple. Or what you can do is you can use help ASCOL, and it would give you this idea. So you use returns. Either you use the term simple if you have simple, if the return data that you have is calculated using simple return method, or you can use the log term if the data you have is return data that you have is calculated based on the log return method. Okay, so let's move back to our file. So this term, this option of 2 week, it would be used if you wanted to estimate weekly returns, right? But if you wanted monthly return, then we would use 2 month. If quarterly, we would use 2 quarter, and if you wanted yearly returns, then we would use 2 years. So these are the data frequencies that we have. Next, sometimes so in our case, we did use XT set, right? We told Stata that we have a panel data, and for XT set, you must not have repeated symbol code date or cross-sectional time values. But for some reason, let's say we have duplicates observations, but still we wanted to calculate return. In that case, we would use the same command as above, but now we would use instead of XT set, we do not need to do XT set, or rather if we do XT set, the Stata wouldn't accept the command. So in that case, we need to tell Stata which one is our time variable, which variable stores the time data. So we would use the time var function, time var option, and within parentheses we would write the name of the variable that stores the time data. So we do not need to XT set then. Then we have this keep option, and what this keep option would do is once we run this ASCOL command, it would delete all the data, right? You can see this in the variable window. It would delete all the variables, but would just keep the data that is related to stock return. So if you wanted to tell Stata to keep all the variables or all the data and do not delete the data, so let's say if you want to convert it into weeks, so the default command would delete the daily data that is not the end of the week, as we saw in a few minutes back. If you use the keep all option, so it wouldn't delete the data. Similarly, we can use keep var option, so that would just keep the variables after the process and delete the rest of the variable. Last thing is that when we use this ASCOL command, it would generate a new variable which would hold the returns, all the weekly prices or monthly prices depending on which frequency we are using. So it would generate a new variable. So in this case, we were converting it to weekly prices, so it generated a variable called week_id. But for some reasons, we need Stata to generate a variable name that is convenient for us, or we need it to process for some other processes. So in that case, or we are going to use a loop, and we cannot afford ASCOL to have its own variable name. In that case, we would use this generate option, and we would, within parentheses, we would write the variable name that we want it to generate. So this is ASCOL command. It's quite powerful. It's quite easy to use. So whether you can use the commands that we show in we explained in our previous video, or you can simply use ASCOL.